Times and Seasons, a program dealing with significant issues of public concern.
During the next half hour, we will focus on gambling and examine some of its effects on society and on human behavior.
Artie, I want some more credit.
In our modern society, the opportunity to gamble for money is available at almost every turn. Whether it's the office baseball or football pool, the casinos in Las Vegas and Atlantic City, the track, or the lottery, it seems almost everybody is doing it. And why not? Many people say there's nothing wrong with it, that everybody deserves a lucky break, or that we're just having a little fun. And besides, it's not hurting anybody. But what are the facts? How harmless is it really?
I didn't realize it affected my whole family. You know, I never knew that it affected my mother and that she used to have to borrow money to get me money so I wasn't going to have my gas turned off. You know, my husband not being able to sleep nights. My kids.
If I was thinking every day about killing myself, jumping off a bridge or maybe taking my car and smashing it across the highway. And what really scared me was the last couple of months I was thinking about maybe if my wife died, maybe that can help me in some way. I wouldn't have to tell her how bad things were.
I mean, we're talking about people who can't trust their dad to go to get a carton of milk because they'll be gone 3 days.
At John Jay College in New York City, Monsignor Joseph Dunn deals with gambling problems full-time.
First of all, gambling is addictive. It's risk-taking behavior, and the American Psychiatric Association now classifies pathological gambling as an illness. We know it's a progressive illness. We know that for about 2% of our adult population, if a person gambles and wins, it triggers a fantasy that they're lucky, and then their life is out of control.
I found the city of Gardena, and that has legalized gambling here in Southern California. And I went down there and I started playing just a very low game, and I started winning. And I thought this was great. My 2 oldest kids were in school, and I thought I can make a living at this. And I won for probably, maybe 2 months. And then I started losing. And I figured if I had won that amount of money playing a small game, let me get into a bigger game and I can win more money. And I just kept losing and losing and losing. And then finally I was losing time away from my family. And I started going to Las Vegas several times a year. I started betting football and sports. I started playing bingo. I would go to bingo 2 and 3 nights a week when I couldn't go to Gardena.
Karen is an active member of Gamblers Anonymous. She started gambling when she was 7 and was known as the best card shuffler in the 2nd grade. Arnie Wexler was also very young when he started gambling. Now he spends all his time trying to help compulsive gamblers. But at one time, his life, too, was totally out of control.
I gambled on anything. The only thing I probably didn't gamble was fishing, because every time I went on a boat, I got sick. But I gambled on anything. I would gamble that we would have 3 inches of rain today, or 2 inches of snow on the ground by 12 o'clock. I gambled on horses, I gambled in casinos, I gambled on racetracks, I gambled on lottery tickets. Didn't matter. Whatever came along, I gambled on.
Gambling destroys family life. Once a person is addicted to gambling, that person, for all purposes, has no time for the wife, the children, or the values of family life. Everything now hinges upon gambling every day, or as we say, being in action. So everything goes. Their pay goes, their money they borrow from their relatives, friends, and so forth. And eventually they begin to embezzle funds, and they end up in jail if we don't help them.
My husband thought I was having an affair. And then he would be up all night wondering where I was. Dinner was never on the table. The house was not cleaned unless I absolutely had to clean it. My son, who was 13 when I quit gambling, we thought he was a slow learner. We had had him tested, and he wore glasses, and we just thought he was a very slow learner. He was always bringing home D's. Well, the first 6 months that I did not gamble, he brought home a 3.5 grade average because he knew where his mother was. Before, he didn't know where his mother was. my daughter, who was 9 when I quit gambling, so I would leave her, I would call a friend and say, catch Kim as she comes off the bus. And I would leave her waiting for me. And she was, you know, just not knowing, you know, whether it was her fault, did she do something wrong? You know, is that why Mommy's not home? And we had no home life.
In San Diego, California, Dr. Ricky Brister is a psychiatrist whose specialty is the compulsive gambler.
He was absolutely destroying his life. 64 years old, been gambling since he was 17, had lost 1 wife, 4 children didn't speak to him, had a fiancée who he had stolen all her credit cards, also taken her friend's credit cards and gone gambling for the last 5 days. He hadn't slept in 3 days. And he came to me in the emergency room on call. Actually, his fiancée had brought him there and was just like, do you really think I'm sick, doctor? Do you really think I'm sick? And reported all these stories and then said, but the only problem is that I gamble.
One of the worst cases, you know, a lot of people think that you got to lose a lot of money to be a compulsive gambler. One of the worst cases I ever saw, a man came to our council office about 5 years ago. And he said, I never went on vacation, I never owned a suit of clothes, I never owned a car, I never owned a house. I never made more than $150 a week, and I never made a bet bigger than $6. And this man was totally destroyed and owed about $15,000 and was sleeping in his friend's car because his wife had thrown him out.
Respected legal scholar Dallin Oakes, now an apostle of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, has also seen the negative effects of compulsive gambling.
How many examples there are of people who as a result of the progressively absorbing influence of gambling, have mortgaged and lost their homes, they have embezzled at their work and lost their jobs, lost their capacity to support their family, gone to prison. The moral carnage of gambling at the extreme progressive level is enormous.
For a compulsive gambler, there's not enough money in the whole world. I'll give you an example. And the man doesn't mind me using his name. His name is Bernie Pacco. He was treasurer of the Fireman's Fund up in Connecticut. And he, unfortunately, one afternoon, went to the High Line and won $7,000. Now he has a nice little home, daughter a nurse, 2 boys in college. You would think that $7,000 would go to pay tuition. Oh, no. Once that individual won $7,000, he couldn't get enough money to reinvest to try to win more and more. And as usual, he lost. And then he started borrowing from the Fireman's Fund, $200,000. Finally, in desperation, in order to be audit, he went to Las Vegas. He borrowed $40,000 more, went to Las Vegas, and he parlayed this 40 into 100,000. But he couldn't stop. He lost it all. This is what gambling does to people.
Of course, these are all tragic stories, but some might say they're just isolated instances, that these are just the stories of a few losers. But what is the truth? How serious is the problem of compulsive gambling?
It's an enormous problem. My studies have indicated that following the National Commission in 1974 to 1976, they identified 1.3 million compulsive gamblers in our country and 2.3 probables. Since then, more and more states have legalized more gambling, and today you can see that our studies will indicate 2% of the adult people that gamble will be addicted. And in New York State alone, that's 250,000. So I would estimate there would be at least 6 million people today suffering the gambling problem, plus the impact on the family. And for every person that gambles obsessively, there are about 20 people that are defrauded of their money, who are concerned about them, and who suffer.
It is not a small problem, and it is available everywhere. Gambling in one form or another is legal in every state in the Union but 4. Only Hawaii, Indiana, Mississippi, and Utah prohibit it. 2 states allow casino gambling, Nevada and New Jersey. Even in those states where gambling is highly regulated and policed, there are significant social problems. Edward Steer, now an attorney in private practice, spent several years cleaning up organized crime in New Jersey as chief prosecutor there.
Because casino gambling is like a magnet for organized crime. There is no way that you can have casino gambling operating on any kind of a scale that's competitive with Atlantic City or Nevada or the Bahamas and not attract organized crime. And it has diverted tremendous amount of resources in New Jersey away from the state's other organized crime problems centered elsewhere in the state and focused all of our attention on Atlantic City. And after a period of 10 years, which has now gone by since the voters approved casino gambling, I can tell you that we are barely holding our own.
Street crimes are also on the increase.
We've had a tripling of the crime rate as a result of casino gambling. And surprisingly, most of the crime is not committed in the back alleys. Most of the crime is committed immediately in and around the casinos. The reason for that is because of the money that people expect to find there, the cash that criminals expect to find in the pockets of people who are going in and out of the casinos and in the rooms of those people at the hotels. It's drawn criminals in from literally all over the country to fleece the people who participate in casino gambling.
In Florida, former Governor Reuben Askew is trying hard to keep casino gambling out of the state, and not just because of the threat of an increase in crime.
Well, I think gambling has a degrading impact upon society, because you literally are looking for pie in the sky, trying to strike your one great big blow, which is a tempting thing, I think, for everyone. But it's a diversion away from doing what you should do, to put in a good day's work to make money, to live and form a more solid basis for your life. And gambling becomes a disease like alcohol. You have Gamblers Anonymous, you have these compulsive gamblers, and I think it's probably the worst form of taxation ever invented, because ultimately the people who are hurt the most are the ones who can afford it the least, and then you have to pick up what's left, and then it costs a lot of people dollars to try to help repair lives for a device that the government allows to exist to begin with. It's a difficult thing to deal with, but given choices, any society is far better off without it.
There's a certain amount of physical glitter that's associated with the casinos. Neon lights, flashy casino decor, all of which appeals to some people. The problem with it is that when you strip away the glamour and the superficial appeal, what you have is a very, very cynical kind of an industry. An industry that's based on the idea that it makes money at the expense of human weakness. It makes money by making other people unhappy, by depriving of other people of their money without giving them anything in return. You get no goods for your money, you get no service for your money. All you get is the fleeting hope that maybe you're going to break the bank. Maybe you're going to walk out of that casino with more money than you came in with. The fact is that you don't, because if you did, the casinos wouldn't exist. They only exist because they take far more money away from people than they ever give back.
Another very popular form of gambling in the United States is the lottery. Several states and the District of Columbia now operate lotteries. They see the lottery as an easy and painless way to raise needed tax dollars. But not everyone agrees with that kind of reasoning.
That governments would tolerate gambling is regrettable. That governments would promote gambling is reprehensible. Governments ought to promote morality and productivity. When they advertise and promote gambling as a way of raising money, they take a short-term fix at the expense of a long-term corrosive effect upon the productive base that has to be taxed to support society. And they also increase the social welfare expenditures, as the experience of states and cities that have been heavily involved in the gambling activities indicates clearly. Oh, it's a destructive, short-term fix.
Lotteries are a different form of gambling. I still don't support them because I think that literally puts the state in the business of encouraging people to gamble. Up in New England, for instance, where they literally compete between states or among states, and they want you to use your change left at your supermarket, you know, to buy lottery tickets. The whole idea of gambling bothers me because I just don't think society ought to have to try to build its economy based on exploiting the weaknesses of its own people.
What's been interesting to me is a new set of gamblers, a new set who just do the lottery, and it's kind of a symptom that's just approaching us now in psychiatry. My wife or somebody will be talking about a family member, she or he spent X amount on the lottery. Now these people aren't identifying themselves now as compulsive gamblers, but I'm quite concerned that even though some gamblers could have always placed a bet, now there'll be some new ones. It's a kind of a new modus operandi, a new way to gamble, and it's certainly accessible. You know, some people might not have had any exposure to gambling or anything, but you can't miss it with the advertising and with the every store you go into, or you go to buy gas or anything, you can buy a lottery ticket. And that's of some concern to me. However, it's just a whisper now. It's just a whisper at a distance that there's some people starting to have problems with it.
I know a woman who embezzled $38,000 from the bank she worked in to pay lottery tickets. I know a young man in Pennsylvania who was 19 years old and cleaned out his bank account to pay to buy $6,000 worth of lottery tickets, and then he turned around and tried to commit suicide by taking 2 bottles of aspirin. I know a man in Connecticut who took $65,000 from a business he was involved with and embezzled the money and used it strictly on lottery. There's a lady in Michigan, I believe, who has $500,000 in losing lottery tickets. I cited the case a couple of minutes ago about the woman who opened up the trunk of her husband's car when she went to fix a flat and found 2 milk cases full of used uncashed lottery tickets, losers. And we're seeing a lot of that.
The lottery is probably the form of gambling which is going to make more compulsive gamblers than any other.
Dr. Larry Braidfoot wrote the book on gambling. Its title is Gambling a Deadly Game, and it clearly indicates his concerns about states that go into the lottery business.
States in 1985 operated lotteries that sold in excess of $9 billion worth of lottery tickets and chances. The states got a lot of money out of that, somewhere around $3.7 billion. But in the process, states spent about $960 million in promoting the lottery, in advertising, in paying ticket sellers, and so forth. That means that there were $960 million spent by the states out of the sale of tickets to promote and to recruit gamblers. That is a new kind of function for the state government. When you go into the lottery business, you're not simply legalizing an activity. What you're deciding is that it's something that the state is going to promote. And that has terribly difficult consequences for the citizens of the state.
Gambling is bigger than the biggest of businesses. It is an enormous private and often illegal tax upon America in a way that has nothing whatever to contribute to the productive base of our society.
Lotteries are the biggest swindle of our country. The money that is held out, say $5 million as a prize, is not $5 million at all. First of all, the odds are stupendous, 50 million to 1 of winning this prize. Secondly, when a person does win a prize, 20% is taxable. And thirdly, it's only doled out on a periodic basis. If a person was given $5 million, they could put it in a bank and live on the interest. But they're not going to get $5 million. And in many cases, it's only during the lifetime of a person that this prize is available. So if they die, they lose it all. So to us, it's a very dishonest method of gambling, and it's corruptive for poor families who look upon the lottery as a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
California is one of the most recent states to get into the lottery business. It was sold to the voters as fun and a good way to raise money for education. At most, it may add 3 or 4% to an enormous education budget. But State Attorney General John Van de Kamp, who opposed the lottery before it was voted in, has other more serious concerns about the lottery.
You find that by and large, the bulk of lottery sales go to those in the $10,000 to $40,000 a year income groups, with ethnic and minority groups, Latino as well as black, proportionately high in terms of sales. And I think if you look at it from a taxation standpoint, if you regard it simply as a tax, you would find that that is regressive, because you are taking, in a sense, a greater slice out of the lower income group than they would certainly pay in taxes. Every convenience market, nearly every liquor store or market sells lottery tickets in California, and they have a very strong distribution scheme, so that means that every commercial center has lottery tickets on sale. And it seems to me that what we're promoting here is a get-rich-quick ethic that has been picked up, $2 billion in sales. And I just don't think that we should be a get-rich-quick society where that is the central ethic. We've had a work ethic that people earn what they work for that has served us very well. And if I don't mind people having fun, and I'm not a prude really about gambling, I think gambling goes back to the beginnings of history, that it seems to me that when we push it as hard as we are, that we are basically tilting the ethical scales of our society, and particularly when government does it. So I think that, in my own personal view, the government should stay about as far away from gambling as possible. We should not be in the promotion business. We should be promoting ethics and values that will serve us best. I think that's part of what we should be doing in government.
And many concerned people agree with Attorney General Van de Kamp that the moral values gambling teaches are the most serious concerns of all.
As a society, we have, in many respects, stated that if you have $10 left at the end of the week, you save it and add to it $10 that you save the next week. And through thrift and planning, you provide a college education for your child, or you have the down payment for a home, or you save the money to start your own business. With the kind of activity that we see at the casino and involved in the lottery, instead we're promoting an economic philosophy that says try to strike it rich, try to hit the home run, try to make the big score. Somebody's going to do it, so it might as well be me.
Gambling promotes greed and covetousness. It promotes an idea of taking something from one's neighbor. It's the antithesis of the Christian attitude, of the attitude that I think is the moral base of all religions, that we should do something for someone else. Gambling promotes the idea that you take something away from someone else. You can't win without their losing. 99.9% of the people who are involved in gambling lose, and the 0.1% win, and they win at the expense of everyone else, and that is a bad moral influence upon society.
Well, we believe the Christian approach to life is that we must be willing to apply ourselves honestly in the eyes of the Lord to our vocation, to our family. A lottery means getting something for nothing. It means that children, for instance, in high school, need not worry about marks in school or go for a degree. When with a little luck, they can win enough money and almost take care of all their needs in life. That's an important area, what lotteries are doing to our youth.
The operators and the retailers are prohibited from selling tickets to kids. I'm sure that kids once in a while, just as they'll buy liquor or cigarettes, will be in a position to buy lottery tickets. What kids see, though, regardless of whether they are directly involved themselves, is the fact that this is a regular, normal, ordinarily accepted way of life, and that gambling and the get-rich-quick scheme is something that we all applaud and think well of, and that's part of life. And I think that's a bad message to send.
And so the final question, is there a way out? Can we save ourselves and our children and our society from this gambling menace?
I would like to see, frankly, less of a thrust of the marketing of gambling nationally. I don't know if that's going to come about, but I don't think it's a healthy trend for a country as great as the United States.
It takes courage to go to the office of a legislator and say, I'm not an expert on this, but I think it's a bad thing for these reasons, and I don't want you to support this in my state. It takes courage to go before a legislative committee and to testify and to be willing to sit and be grilled. It takes courage to stand up after someone from the gambling industry has portrayed the lottery as harmless as candy from a nickel store and as much fun as the movies and as lucrative for the state as discovering gold. But there's a lot at stake.
First of all, citizens are parents, and they ought to teach their young people the bad effects of gambling upon them personally and upon society. And I think teachers should teach this in the public and private schools. And I suggest that citizens' organizations ought to organize by appropriate political means to fight proposals that gambling be extended, and in all events to prevent gambling from being sponsored, advertised, and promoted by any institution of government.
The program you have just seen is part of a series of programs dealing with significant issues of public concern. Times and Seasons is a production of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.